Good Monday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for December the 26th. Hope that you've had a wonderful Christmas weekend. It was great to see everyone yesterday, and I hope you're able to spend a wonderful time with family and friends enjoying the holiday season. We still have New Year's coming up, and looking forward to continuing to get to spend time with family and loved ones and recognizing the incredible blessings that God has given us and extending never-ending thanks to Him for His many blessings. Let's read together today from Ecclesiastes chapter 7. Ecclesiastes chapter 7. This text is one that is probably, again, familiar to anyone that has a decent recollection of Ecclesiastes. This is one of those sections that is kind of pithy. It's easy to remember because some of it goes against just what we would probably think as being common sense. These are things that are definitely countercultural to our society. So we're going to think about this. I think this chapter and going into next chapter, they are definitely chapters that focus on wisdom, showing the great value and need for wisdom. Wisdom is really wisdom really begins to be focused on in verse number 11 of this chapter. And that continues on throughout the rest of this chapter and into chapter 8 as well. But for today, let's read here in Ecclesiastes 7 and verse number 1. Just keep in mind as we're going through this, these first 10 verses, these first 8 verses, they are going to be set up with the formula of this thing is better than that thing. And before you start scratching your head wondering what the preacher could be thinking about, we're going to give some give the perspective from which we can understand these things to be true. We'll highlight that as well once we get through reading this text together. So let's read here Ecclesiastes chapter 7, beginning at verse number 1. A good name is better than fine perfume, and the day of one's death is better than the day of one's birth. It is better to go to a house of mourning than to go to a house of feasting, since that is the end of all mankind, and the living should take it to heart. Verse 3, grief is better than laughter, for when a face is sad, a heart may be glad. The heart of the wise is in a house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in a house of pleasure. It is better to listen to rebuke from a wise person than to listen to the song of fools. For the crackling of burning thorns under the pot, for like the crackling of burning thorns under the pot, so is the laughter of the fool. This too is Hevel, or as it says here in the Christian Center Bible, futile. Some of your translations might say vanity or meaningless. Verse number 7, truly the practice of exhortation turns a wise person into a fool. Or excuse me, the practice of extortion. The practice of extortion turns a wise person into a fool, and a bribe corrupts the mind. The end of a matter is better than its beginning. A patient spirit is better than a proud spirit. Don't let your spirit rush to be angry, for anger abides in the heart of fools. Don't say, why were the former days better than these? Since it is not wise for you to ask this. Wisdom is as good as an inheritance and an advantage to those who see the sun. Because wisdom is protection as silver is protection, but the advantage of knowledge is that wisdom preserves the life of its owner. Consider the work of God, who can straighten out what he has made crooked. In the day of prosperity, be joyful, but in the day of adversity, consider God has made the one as well as the other, so that no one can discover anything that will come after him. In my futile life, I have seen everything. Someone righteous perishes in spite of his righteousness, and someone wicked lives long in spite of his evil. Don't be excessively righteous, and don't be overly wise. Why should you destroy yourself? Don't be excessively wicked, and don't be foolish. Why should you die before your time? It is good that you grasp the one and do not let the other slip from your hand. For the one who fears God will end up with both of them. Wisdom makes the wise person stronger than 10 rulers of a city. There is certainly no one righteous on the earth who does good and never sins. Don't pay attention to everything people say, or you may hear your servant cursing you. For in your heart you know that many times you yourself have cursed others. I have tested all this by wisdom. I resolved I will be wise. but it was beyond me. What exists is beyond reach and is very deep. Who can discover it? I turn my thoughts to know, explore, and examine wisdom and an explanation for things, and to know that wickedness is stupidity and folly is madness. And I find more bitter than death the woman who is a trap, her heart a net and her hands chains. The one who pleases God will escape her, but the sinner will be captured by her. Look, says the teacher, I have discovered this by adding one thing to another to find out the explanation, which my soul continually searches for, but does not find. I found one person in 1,000 cities, I found one person in 1,000, but none of those was a woman. Only see this, I've discovered that God made people upright, but they pursued many schemes. And that is Ecclesiastes chapter 7. So to understand really what we see in the first few verses is to understand that this is all about perspective, because nobody would say, or at least I would say maybe common-ish wisdom would say that, well, one's death is not better than the day of one's birth. That's the end. Why would that be better than the beginning? Well, if your perspective is eternal, then you recognize the reality of that if somebody's death is the person who has died is one who's been faithful to God, then what they're about to enter into is the reward. Whereas one's birth, again, yes, it begins life, but you're entering into a difficult world. Whereas you're entering into, again, the reward on the day of one's death. It's better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting. Well, how does that make any sense? Well, it makes sense whenever it reminds you of the realities of life. Again, if you're going to the house of mourning for someone who's faithful, that's a good day. So many of these ideas here are dependent on your perspective. They're dependent on worldview. So as you've read through this together with me, and we continue to read through this from time to time, remember, it's all about perspective. How do we see things? If our perspective is very temporal, if it is the here and now, then yeah, these things aren't going to make any sense. But if you have an eternal perspective, something that is long-term, something that is seen through God's eyes, then you can see how these things certainly are true. The wisdom portion, again, there's wisdom and the wise who are mentioned in the first few verses, but specifically in verse 11, wisdom is as good as an inheritance and an advantage to those who see the sun, because wisdom is protection as silver is protection, but the advantage of knowledge is that wisdom preserves the life of its owner. So much of this sounds very Proverbsy to me. And in fact, a number of these things that we see within this text are connected to the Proverbs, specifically verse 19. You can read something very similar in Proverbs 21 and verse 22. So it's important to seek wisdom, but at the same time, we don't need to do, as looking at verse 16, we don't need to act as if we were overly wise. Same thing, we don't need to act as if we were overly righteous. That's self-righteousness. That's also arrogance, thinking that you are the wisest person in the room. We shouldn't act that way. We should recognize and judge accurately and judge modestly who we are, and not try to present ourselves as being better than we are simply for the fact of maybe impressing others. That's not necessary at all. Verse 23, beginning there, just this pursuit of wisdom that the preacher is engaging in. I've tested all this by wisdom, and I resolved I will be wise, but it was beyond me. What exists is beyond reach and very deep. Who can discover it? I turn my thoughts to know, explore, and examine wisdom. Do we seek that in our lives? Do we seek to know? Do we seek to explore? Do we seek to expand our knowledge and understanding of this world? Well, we ought to. We need to recognize that, yes, this world is very deep. There's so many layers to things. There are so many things that we would not even begin to comprehend. Actually, that reminds me, I saw a picture today or yesterday. Imagine with me a circle that's a pie graph. Imagine a circle that's a pie graph. You have two little slices cut out of it. One is, if I remember this correctly, what I know, that's a very small sliver. A 3 to 4 times bigger sliver is what I know I don't know. And then the whole rest of the pie And we're talking like 95% of this pie of a pie graph is the things I don't know that I don't know. That's really the reality that we're living in. It reminds us of the limitations of who we are, the limitations of our knowledge and wisdom perspective. But that doesn't mean we should not try to pursue, again, greater understanding, especially in things that are important, like Scripture. It is good for us to pursue a greater knowledge of Scripture. It's good for us to explore Scripture. It's good for us to examine Scripture, to meditate upon Scripture. That is something that will certainly help us in this life. And again, that last section, 23 through 29, sounds very Proverbsy. Even talks about the woman who is a trap. Her heart is a net and her hands chains. The one who pleases God will escape her, but the sinner will be captured by her. We need to pursue wisdom in everything, and that woman could represent just the foolishness of this world. We need to be a people who, as the text says, who seek to please God. If we do that, we will escape the foolishness of this world. But if we do not seek to please God, then we're going to seek to please ourselves. We're going to get caught up in all sorts of foolishness. It's going to only bring us difficulty and trouble in this life. And at the end, we're going to look back and say, man, why didn't I make better decisions? We didn't make better decisions because we did not seek to know. We did not seek to explore. We did not seek to understand and examine wisdom. So let that be our endeavor today, to seek in some way to grow in some sort of knowledge, to grow in some sort of examination or understanding or wise way. And if we continue to do that each and every day, I just think I don't have to know it all today. This is incremental. This is a pursuit. This is a journey that we're all on. We need to continue to put effort into that journey, continue to grow a little bit day by day, to be more wise, to be more understanding, to be more knowledgeable, and then to put that into practice. That's why I'm so thankful for God's grace. God's grace doesn't demand that I'm perfectly wise, doesn't demand that I am perfect in every way, but it does expect that because of what he has given to me, that I'm going to respond by giving everything to him. So let's pursue that today. Let's pursue a little better knowledge, a little better wisdom, a little better application. And in doing so, we will certainly be blessed in this life. I think that's something that the preacher really wants us to understand as he examines the issue of wisdom here at the end of chapter 7 and moving into chapter 8 tomorrow. So I hope you'll keep that in mind as you go throughout today. Hope you'll join in tomorrow as we continue reading through Ecclesiastes, marching our way toward the end on Saturday, whenever we will read chapter 12, and then turning the page on Sunday as we get into the new year. We'll be looking at Genesis chapter 1. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Have a great Monday, everyone. Take care. God bless.